So there I am. It's 12:30 a.m. Wednesday, January 19th. That night, I, with the trusty help of my guy in the chair, Austin, had just finalized the first edition of This Week in Video Games for 2022. We went back and plumbed the headlines of December 2021 and those vaporous opening weeks of January when you could go as many as 3 or 4 days without needing to know which day of the week it is. We were thorough, and we were sure that when we had wrapped and rendered that episode at 12:30 a.m. on Wednesday, that there wasn't a single piece of gaming news worth talking about that we hadn't included in that episode. And we were right. And then 12:31 happened.
Here we are witnessing a historic moment in the gaming industry.
Microsoft has purchased Activision Blizzard for nearly $69 billion, which means Xbox now owns Call of Duty, Warcraft, and tons more.
And a deal said to be valued at nearly $70 billion.
Activision has been acquired by Microsoft.
It took a long time for my brain to process what the fuck was going on. I read this headline at 12:31 on Jason Schreier's Twitter feed, and I'm like, haha, good joke, Jason. And then I searched for the Wall Street Journal article he was referencing, and it was real. But it was just a rumor at that point. It was one of those fanciful things you hear like, haha, guys, there's a Nintendo Switch 2 coming this year and it's gonna have 4K, yeah, sure, buddy. So I thought it was bullshit. Less than 5 minutes later, boom! Official announcement from Xbox, like, oh hey guys, we just bought Activision Blizzard for nearly $69 billion. Nice. And that was that. Within the span of 5 minutes, I'd gone from never imagining such a deal to thinking it was bullshit to having it confirmed. That was a really wild 5 minutes, and I was really pissed off. Phil, you couldn't have done this 24 hours earlier, 5 hours earlier, an hour earlier? I was on holidays for 2 weeks. You had that entire window to announce this, but no. You announced 30 minutes before This Week in Video Games goes live, so the entire comment section was just people roasting me for missing the news. Fair enough, I say. So, as I was putting together the next edition of This Week in Video Games, it very quickly became apparent to me that the entire episode would be consumed by that story because there's just so much to say on it. So, rather than skimp on the details or shortchange the rest of the news going on in the industry, I decided I would do this special bumper show that just talks exclusively about what I expect to be the largest video game news story of 2022. Gary Whitta's erotic Wordle spin-off game notwithstanding. In addition to covering the who, what, when, where, and what the fuck, I also just wanted some space to talk about my reaction to all of this. It's not often that the tectonic plates of our industry shift like this, and trying to squeeze my take into a 10-minute news blog would have been a challenge. So here's the story so far in the biggest video game merger of all time, and what I think about it. If you'd have told me 6 months ago that the state of California's lawsuit against Activision Blizzard would eventually lead to the sale of the company to one of the largest tech giants on the planet, I'd have said, wow, I can't believe Tencent bought Activision Blizzard. What started as a lawsuit alleging a toxic and dangerous work environment would quickly lead to a culling of Activision Blizzard leaders and luminaries, a staff walkout, calls for unionization, and with senior leaders' unwillingness to take responsibility and fix the mess that they themselves created. Hell, it was only a few short months after Activision Blizzard appointed Jen O'Neill to co-lead Blizzard that she left because, wait for it, they weren't paying her the same as the man doing the same job as her. Can you believe that? Can you believe the balls on Bobby Kotick to stiff this woman a fair paycheck in that environment, in that moment, and when he himself is earning $150 million a year? There really couldn't be a clearer example of just how deeply the rod had set in. That's a lie, of course. There are clearer examples. All of the other shit Bobby Kotick did. On the 17th of November, the Wall Street Journal published a stunning expose alleging that Bobby Kotick, who to that point had feigned total ignorance of the cultural problems at Activision Blizzard, had not only known about these problems, but was complicit in at least some of them. The article alleges that Kotick had intervened to protect a senior Call of Duty developer who HR had ruled against in a sexual harassment case. It also brought up older, confirmed stories about Bobby Kotick, like the time he left a voice message in which he threatened to kill his personal assistant. Kotick would go on to settle that one in court and, quote, regrets the incident. I'm sure he does. If later reporting from the Wall Street Journal is to be believed, it was their report, more than the California lawsuit, or the pushback from staff, or the pressure from the rest of the industry, that would eventually lead to Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard. Apparently, Microsoft had made overtures to Activision Blizzard in the past, but Kotick was cool on the idea. Sensing blood in the water and dealing with increasingly nervous board members, Kotick spied a, quote, graceful exit, end quote, and so the lines of communication between the two companies was thrown open. Phil Spencer apparently spearheaded the deal, working through the holidays to land it. Roughly 2 months after the publishing of that Wall Street Journal article damning Bobby Kotick and his leadership, Kotick sold the company he led to Microsoft for $68.7 billion. So, let's talk about Bobby. First up, it's got to be said, sometimes there's just no justice in this world. Bobby Kotick got paid $155 million last year. That's not a typo, by the way. A man whose best ever idea was make more Call of Duty took home $155 million at the same time as some of his workers had to live in their cars because Blizzard wasn't paying a living wage. At this very moment, developers at Raven Studio who support Call of Duty are striking because a bunch of minimum wage quality assurance workers were sacked for no good reason. These people earned $17 an hour with no benefits. Bobby Kotick took home $155 million last year. You might remember Bobby Kotick's fig leaf martyrdom, refusing any pay or stock until after Activision Blizzard's culture crisis was fixed. Well, that didn't end up happening, did it? Microsoft is paying $95 a share for Activision Blizzard, which puts Bobby Kotick's initial payday at around $400 million. Talk about a golden parachute, but it gets better. When this deal was announced, Microsoft made very clear and very public that Kotick would be staying on as CEO. Everyone flocked to this headline without really thinking about it. Microsoft does not own Activision Blizzard yet. They won't until probably June 2023. It's very risky for them to begin dictating or even signaling executive or governance changes until that sale is finalized. The only thing they can say is that Bobby Kotick will remain CEO. But of course, he will not. Obviously, Phil Spencer does not want this guy anywhere near his leadership team. If Phil Spencer could figure out a way to put Bobby Kotick into a rocket and fire him into the sun, he probably would. But he can't. That's more of a Jeff Bezos thing. So for now, Phil is stuck with Kotick until such time as he can politely ask him to leave. At that moment, Bobby Kotick's second golden parachute deploys. As highlighted by Stephen Toledo of Axios, when Bobby Kotick is removed as CEO, he will be paid approximately $270 million, bringing his total payday for this transaction to roughly $670 million US. That's what I meant at the start when I said that there is no justice in this world sometimes. If one of us threatened to kill someone or help cover up sexual harassment in the workplace, we'd probably have a rough time of it. Lose our jobs, maybe more. Life would suck, at least a little. Bobby Kotick, on the other hand, gets to walk away from the cultural mess he helped create and cover up at Activision Blizzard and the ongoing lawsuit from the state of California. He gets to do so without the indignation of being forced out, and he gets $670 million to do so. People ask me what I think about this deal, and my typical answer has been, I think this deal kind of sucks for a lot of reasons. Mostly because it not only wipes clean the sins of Bobby Kotick, but also rewards him handsomely for his transgressions. I get why it had to go down this way. It just sucks that Bobby Kotick couldn't have gone down first. Just because I think this deal kind of sucks doesn't mean I don't think it should happen, because to be honest, I think it should. Ideally, there would be some other circuit breaker in this equation, but if industry consolidation is the price we have to pay for Activision Blizzard staff not being treated like shit, then I don't think we should let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Because regardless of what you think about this deal, and I know we all have different opinions, I think we can all agree that most of the staff at Activision Blizzard King are likely in for a better time than they were under the tyrannous yoke of Kotick and his corrupt lackeys. Let's not forget that this cultural crisis is still very much ongoing. It was only this week that the Wall Street Journal reported that Kotick was still trying to hide the scale of the issues, trying to downplay the number of dismissed and disciplined staff members for fear that it would make the company look bad. Sorry, Bobby, that ship's already sailed. On top of that, there's the growing calls for unionization, which this week achieved a breakthrough when staff members at the aforementioned Raven Studios formed the first union at a North American AAA games publisher, a huge victory in their fight to keep those quality assurance staff in the job. The troubles plaguing Activision Blizzard are deep, they are many, and they do not suddenly disappear with a change of management. But that change does bring hope. Jason Schreier of Bloomberg spoke to a number of staff and reported that many of them are expressing optimism about the takeover, which makes sense since Microsoft went through its own cultural transformation in years past and emerged stronger for it. There's also just the general track record that Microsoft have of buying studios, filling their coffers with cash, and just stepping back and letting them make the things that they want to make. We haven't exactly seen the dividends of that strategy from Microsoft yet, since they've only been rolling with it for the last 2 to 3 years, but we've absolutely seen that strategy technology payout big from Sony, so I don't think it's an untested thought experiment. Sony studios have their own cultural challenges, particularly Naughty Dog and Crunch, but by and large, most Sony developers comment that the freedom to make what they want to make is a really good thing, and if Microsoft can bring that to Activision Blizzard while cleaning up the whole sleazy sexual harassment thing, then yeah, that's probably going to be a good thing for most Activision Blizzard staff. I say most because the reality is that some people are going to get made redundant out of this. You can't merge two entities of this size without support functions getting squeezed. I'm talking HR, finance, ops, legal, the admin and support functions that can be scaled across organizations in a way that game dev just can't. Those workers matter just as much as game dev workers do, and it will suck to see them be collateral damage in this merger. But yes, this is probably a good deal for most Activision Blizzard staff, but I do wonder, is it a good deal for Microsoft? So first of all, I have to say this. Everyone who is really smart thinks that this is a good deal for Microsoft. So I must be really dumb when I think to myself, I don't know, man. I can't quite see it. Microsoft acquired Activision Blizzard King for $95 a share, which is what shares were trading at before the California lawsuit stuff began, and before both Overwatch and Diablo 4 were delayed into 2023. For that $70 billion, Microsoft got a whole bunch of studios, including King, which sets them up for a strong push into mobile. They get Call of Duty, which is basically the #1 console gaming franchise in the world. They get Blizzard with its library of IP and its recurring WoW revenue. Most importantly, they get access to about 390 million monthly active users, many of whom are on mobile and in Asia, a platform and a geography that Microsoft has struggled to gain a foothold in. Bottom line, Microsoft bought an entity that is pulling in around $8 billion a year in revenue, but only around $2 billion a year in profit. This in a world where a single mobile game like Honor of Kings can make the same amount of profit just from the one game. More actually, in 6 years, Honor of Kings has made $13 billion. The market says that Activision Blizzard is worth nearly $70 billion, and the market is pretty clever, so they're surely right. But I look at this purchase in a really different light than I do the Bethesda purchase, for example. I mean, think of that. Just a few short years ago, 1/10 the price, and what did they get? Bethesda game studios with Fallout and Elder Scrolls and Starfield and Elder Scrolls Online. They got Arcane Studios and all of their talent and IP. id Software, Doom, Quake, not to mention the id Tech engine, which is a modern marvel, Machine Games with Wolfenstein, Tango Gameworks with Evil Within and Ghostwire Tokyo. For $7 billion, you got some seriously massive IP and a whole bunch of studios who were just firing on all cylinders, ready to make great games today. What did you get with Activision Blizzard? Well, COD is kind of hitting a wall at the moment. Vanguard sales were down 40% last year, and already there is talk that Microsoft may abandon the annualized release schedule that has been the rock on which Activision was built. That's great news for devs, by the way, but it's less appealing to shareholders given that COD still makes mountains of money, albeit less than it used to. Of course, Microsoft got Blizzard. And what's that today? Setting aside the huge cultural transformation that company has to go through, there's been a massive brain drain of late as senior talent has left to form their own studios. Hell, look at former CEO Mike Morhame's Dreamhaven, a new publisher with a bunch of new studios under it, all of them staffed by former Blizzard luminaries. Then there's the Blizzard IP. I mean, StarCraft is dead right now, and sure, you could bring it back, but how big is the RTS market today? Are Warcraft 4? Sure, but again, the RTS genre is pretty niche. Diablo 4, that's going to be big, but I'm also certain that Diablo Immortal is going to make more money for Microsoft than Diablo 4 will, because luckily you can't monetize Diablo 4 without everyone going insane. Then there's World of Warcraft, which many people think is still raking in endless cash, but that is not the case. The exodus from WoW has been cataclysmic, no pun intended, with some estimates putting current subscribers as low as 1 million. That's not a lot of money for a corporation like Microsoft. I don't think the issues inherent in WoW's design were Bobby Kotick's fault, by the way. There's some serious design challenges there that will take years of work to turn around, and while New World reminded us that the market for MMOs is still very large, I don't think we can assume that WoW magically gets back to 10 million subs a month just because Phil Spencer's in charge. And then there's Overwatch. I mean, I just don't even know with that thing, to be honest. The degree to which Blizzard have bungled that franchise is astounding, and I still have not seen anything to suggest that sequel is an actual sequel. with a very expensive esports league attached to it, that whole thing really needs to pay off and pay off big and keep paying off if it's going to be worth it. Outside of the current studios and IPs, Phil Spencer has already been publicly musing about the revival of classic IPs like Tony Hawk and Spyro and Crash Bandicoot and Guitar Hero. Hell, even Hexen got a mention from Phil. I'd love it if that were the case. It would be awesome to see these classic games return to the regular rotation. I love all these franchises, but shareholders don't, because they don't make money. A lesson that Activision themselves learned when they tried to resurrect them, only to then abandon them and put those studios back on Call of Duty content. For shareholders, I expect that King, makers of Candy Crush and dozens of other games basically the same as Candy Crush, feels like the crown jewel in this purchase, to be honest. That's a set of studios that just make money, and they make it in the mobile space where development costs are a fraction of what AAA games cost, and it scales infinitely. I mean, we get excited when a game sells 5 million units. Candy Crush has 2.7 billion downloads. So yeah, I expect shareholders are going to be more interested in what King is producing versus what Toys for Bob are working on. When I saw the Bethesda deal, I'm like, okay, $7 billion, good IP, functional studios. Microsoft can just absorb all of that, fold it into their ecosystem, and it becomes an immediate value add. It immediately bolsters their IP library, their development talent pool, their exclusive lineup, the value proposition of Game Pass. It's kind of plug and play. With Activision Blizzard for $70 billion, I really think, how are they going to make that money back? No part of this is plug and play. To get this new entity earning its purchase price back, it's going to require a radical transformation of both Activision Blizzard and Microsoft. I don't know how that looks. I really don't. It's not as simple as more exclusive content on Game Pass, because I think this purchase changes the entire way that Microsoft view the gaming landscape and their role in it. The console war that those low IQ brainlets argue about on Twitter, that's done. This is a whole new era right here. No sooner had this announcement gone out than Sony ponies were like, ruh-roh. Activision Blizzard, love them or hate them, they make a whole lot of games that people want to play. Call of Duty for starters, not to mention the remains of the Overwatch player base, those looking forward to Diablo 4 console's release, and lovers of classic games like Spyro and Crash. And can I just say, it's super weird that those two franchises which got their start on PlayStation are now property of Microsoft, same way they own Banjo-Kazooie and Perfect Dark. Ridiculous. God damn it, Microsoft better be working on a Smash Brothers equivalent at this point, or this entire merger was completely pointless. Anyway, as I was saying, there was much angst about whether or not Microsoft would make the entire Activision Blizzard catalog exclusive to Microsoft's ecosystem. Sony themselves were kind of anxious about this when they said to the Wall Street Journal, quote, "We expect that Microsoft will abide by contractual agreements and continue to ensure Activision games are multi-platform," end quote. That's some fairly blunt language, given that Microsoft has absolutely no obligation whatsoever to keep Activision games multi-platform, except where existing contracts stipulate such. As people were wondering about how all of this would land, Phil Spencer himself took to Twitter to adopt the temporary mantle of Pony Whisperer. Quote, "Had good calls this week with leaders at Sony. I confirmed our intent to honor all existing agreements upon acquisition of Activision Blizzard and our desire to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation. Sony is an important part of our industry and we value our relationship," end quote. I was very unsurprised by this. We used to say of the Bethesda deal that you don't spend $7 billion and not make the content exclusive. Well, of the Activision Blizzard deal, I say you don't spend $70 billion and then make your content exclusive to specific plastic boxes. It's a totally different equation here. You're talking about a cash outlay that demands stupendous amounts of growth to see a return on investment. Microsoft are going to be hooking into every possible growth vector, and PlayStation is a huge growth opportunity for them. I mean, PS4 sold 120 million units to date. The PS5 will probably do the same or more over its life cycle when people can start getting their hands on one. Xbox have not cared about console sales for a long time. They don't make money from consoles. They care about ecosystem. And if they can use their big hitting IP as a Trojan horse to get you to create a Microsoft account while playing one of their games on a PlayStation, then they're going to do that. I mean, what if Overwatch 2 on PlayStation 5 comes with 3 free months of Game Pass, booted up on your PC, on xCloud, on your mate's old Xbox that he doesn't use anymore? Boom. You're in, baby. Xbox have got you by the short and curlies at that point, and they are not letting go. Many people are theorizing that this deal is going to lead to more exclusive Xbox content. I kind of see it the opposite way. I think Microsoft's growth appetite is now so large that cutting off the entire segment of PlayStation gamers is just a bad idea. And while I don't expect every Microsoft game to end up on PlayStation, I definitely expect more than a few of them will. Does this mean that Sony is doomed? Well, if you ask the stock market, maybe. The day after the announcement, Sony's shares plunged, with the company losing some $20 billion in market value. I may not be very smart, but I know that that's dumb, because Sony are going to be just fine. I think it's important to remember what I said earlier. One of the hallmarks of Phil Spencer's leadership is his willingness to pick up and run with the playbook laid down by Sony. Aggressive studio acquisitions followed by letting those studios make whatever the hell they want to make. Sony's voracious appetite for exclusives saw them lock down the best output from Japan and saw them nurture some of the most talented studios in the West. None of that work is erased or undermined by this deal. We don't suddenly become less excited for God of War Ragnarok just because Microsoft now owns Hearthstone. Much of this conversation remains centered on Game Pass and how it becomes an increasingly unstoppable juggernaut with this acquisition. Okay, cool, but Sony haven't even suited up for that battle yet. They're in the process of doing that now with Project Spartacus. Neither have Nintendo, and who knows if they ever will. Neither have Tencent or Embracer. Game Pass dominates because it's pretty much the only game in town right now, just like Netflix was back in the day. But now there's Disney Plus and Hulu and HBO Max, and I've even heard of a subscription service called Paramount Plus. It's probably not a real thing, I think it's just a meme. Point is, between their exclusives, Project Spartacus, their push into mobile, their burgeoning TV and movie stuff, and tons more, Sony have a lot of growth vectors that they themselves are going to be able to tap, and they are going to be just fine. The rumors of their impending doom are greatly exaggerated, but that's not to say that they aren't going to be rushing to get their hands on as many studios as their creditors will allow, because Microsoft's Moby Dick-sized acquisition cannot go unanswered. So a few times in this video, I've said that I think this deal kinda sucks. I've listed some reasons why, but here's the big one. I think we should all be worried about industry consolidation, and no deal in the history of video games has consolidated more of this industry than this deal. Long have we discussed the expansion of Tencent across some of the largest and most profitable publishers and developers. Hell, they own Riot Games and Digital Extremes, and they own part of Supercell and Epic Games. Plus, a whole bunch more on top of that. Sony have been on a massive buying spree for years now, with notable acquisitions like Bluepoint, Insomniac, and Housemarque in just the last few years alone. You might not have heard of Embracer Group, but they're buying up pretty much every AA Western developer they can get their hands on, including most recently Gearbox, makers of Borderlands. There's dozens and dozens of acquisitions that fall outside this list as well, and it all points to an inevitable endpoint of just a handful of corporations owning all the best IPs and all the best studios, the same way that Disney now owns pretty much everything. That can be good sometimes. I mean, look at the MCU. We all love that, right? Except for those auteur film director guys. Then there's Star Wars, which is fucked now. Like, it's just fucked. They fucked it, okay? They really did. Then again, it's not like the prequel trilogy was all that great, and that was all George. Point is, you can't necessarily draw a straight line between a thing being owned by a big corporation and that same thing being bad. I do know one thing though. I do know that mega corporations exist in large part to stop other things existing. They occupy outsized positions in the market. They are tastemakers in the crudest and most vulgar sense of the word. If anything outside of their ownership begins to blossom, they quickly either destroy it or assimilate it into their great hive mind. It does worry me to imagine a video games industry ruled over by these titanic golems, because I don't believe that we as consumers get better video games in that future. I think it breaks more Star Wars than it does MCU, but maybe I'm just a cynic. As worried as I am about that, I also believe that video games are far more resistant to this centralization than many other forms of entertainment. I mean, Valheim was the work of 5 people. Death's Door was the work of 2 people plus a support staff. Stardew Valley was 1 dude. You can't make a movie or a TV show with 5 people or less. The barrier to entry is massive. Building and publishing new IP is essentially impossible without the support of those mega corporations. But it's still possible here in the world of video games, and that's never going to stop being possible. I think it will get harder as these corporations swallow up more and more and consolidate their storefronts and learn how to block out any noise that they don't want their consumers to hear. But I think that good video games will always find a way to be made and then to be found designed by people. Still, even with this optimism, I can't but be pessimistic about the long-term effects of this trend. Sony and Microsoft both function as benevolent overlords right now, empowering their studios to deliver great games. But I don't fundamentally believe that corporations are built to do good, because they're not. They're built to make money, and in the coming content war, when there's no more publishers or studios or IP to buy, and there's no more consumers they can wrap their arms around because they already have them all, then eventually the only growth vector available is to start charging us more for less, or more for nothing, such as in the case of NFTs, which, by the way, are the foundation of the metaverse that Microsoft specifically called out when they purchased Activision Blizzard. So if you don't think that Microsoft is going to be jumping on the NFT bandwagon at some point, then you're in for a very rude awakening. I'm glad this deal happened because I really do believe that Phil Spencer and Microsoft are sufficiently motivated to fix Activision Blizzard's problems, and I think they'll do it. I'm glad this deal happened because I think Activision Blizzard staff will be better off at the end of it. But I think this deal kind of sucks because I wish there was another way. I wish Bobby Kotick didn't get to walk away scot-free and $670 million richer. I wish there was a clearer path forward for Activision Blizzard's renewal because I think the growth targets necessary to earn back this purchase cost, I don't know that that necessarily leads to better outputs from these studios. I wish that Bobby Kotick and his ilk could have been removed without the industry becoming increasingly more consolidated in the hands of a few major entities, accelerating an arms race that can only end with a handful of corporations and billionaires owning all of the studios and IPs that we love. I just wish a deal like this wasn't necessary, but it kind of feels like it is necessary right now. So we'll just have to see how it goes.